Hey, it's Ted McGrath. So here is 7 quick closing tips from the stage. I've closed about 13 million from the stage. Doing sales videos online has led to overall about 40 million in sales for me. And I want to share with you the closing strategies that I've used to actually do that. So number one, when you're closing from the stage, the first thing to know is that you have the presentation that you're doing that's leading up to the close. But when I make a pitch, I actually let the audience know first and foremost that a pitch is actually coming. So when I'm doing a live event, I just did a seminar, I do them every 2 months. One of the first things I say is, today I'm going to walk you through an offer and I'm going to invite you to work more closely with us and work with us in some of our programs so we can help you. So I always extend an invitation before I make the pitch when I'm closing from the stage. And I find that works really, really well. Because one of the problems that people have in pitching is there's resistance in the room, or there's resistance when you're doing it virtually. And so to get rid of the resistance, you just tell the audience that you're going to make an offer. You can tell them on day one if you're doing a 3-day seminar. If you're doing a webinar that's 90 minutes, you can tell them in the first 5 minutes. But I always tell people that an offer is coming to just kind of ease out the resistance in the room. And I let them know that it's an invitation that I'm making to them. That's the first closing strategy. The second closing strategy is throughout my presentation, I always share success stories. So if you're going to pitch, particularly if you're going to pitch in a seminar room, or if you're going to pitch virtually and you're going to do high ticket offers, you should always have people either live giving their testimonials or videos giving their testimonials. The best thing you can actually do is get people live. So when I do seminars, I'll call my clients up on stage, they'll share their success stories, and people can really see a real person that's having success. So that's the second closing strategy. Always have success stories. I like to have 3 success stories throughout a presentation where I'm selling something high ticket. High ticket would be, for me, something anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000. High ticket could also be something that's like $10,000 if you do it in a webinar. So that's closing strategy number 2. Closing strategy number 3, and this is actually something that's kind of spread through our industry a little bit, where people saw me do this high ticket close. Back in the day, I used to sell very high ticket stuff, $100,000, $200,000 offers from the stage. And one of the things that I would do is I would make a call to action, and I would have people stand up and grab an envelope if they wanted to join the program. And so what this did was it kind of turned making an offer into like a show. So like girls would stand up and it'd be like, this girl's on fire. And the men would stand up as like bad to the bone. And so I would have people stand up in a room, 1, for social proof. 2, I can see how I'm doing with the close. So when I make a call to action and somebody stands up, like this last event, I had 43% of the room stand up for a $35,000 offer. And so when I made the pitch, it was like everybody popped really fast. So leading up to the pitch, I then invite them to stand up and accept my invitation for the offer. And that gets some of the room to pop right away. I was talking to my friend Alex Mandozian, who's been in this industry for like 20 years. He was an original mentor of mine. We were literally just talking last week. He's like, man, I use that strategy that I watched you do in the room, and it works. He goes, I do it for a lot of the big guys in the space, and I pitch for them, and he says it works. I was talking with another friend of mine who's got like $250 million in real estate, and when he does real estate seminars, he told me the same thing. He's like, I use that strategy that we used to use 8 years ago when he was, in seminars with me. So it works. Fundamentally, it's a great way to do a high-end offer if you're in a room. If you're not in a room, obviously you can't do the envelope close if you're not in a physical room. But in a physical room, the envelope close is amazing. Okay, so I highly recommend doing seminars in person. It's a great way to close. So we do the envelope close. Second thing is people won't initially take action. So that was my third thing, is the envelope close. The fourth thing is people won't actually take action on the first call to action for the most part. Okay, unless you do a really good pitch. It happened to me at my last seminar. I did a really good pitch, and I would say I got 43% of the room to stand up for the offer. I would say 30% of that 43% stood on the first call to action. That doesn't typically happen. The seminar before that, it was kind of the reverse. I think like 10% stood up on the first call to action. So you just need to know that when you make the first call to action, you haven't gotten the majority of the room yet. Okay. So make multiple calls to action is my fourth closing technique for you. How do you actually do that? Well, when you're doing a presentation, you actually have to think ahead of time, what are the objections that the audience is going to have? So when I make the first call to action, I think, okay, what are they thinking right now? So I'll say, hey, some of you are probably thinking right now that I should have stood up and grabbed the envelope, or I might want to stand up and grab the envelope, or I might want to take this offer right now. And then I say, I want to invite you to not think about this anymore, but I want to invite you to take action. Like, you came to this seminar, or you showed up to this webinar, not because you were thinking you needed something, you know you need help. And so rather than think about it, I want to invite you to get into action and just stand up, or get into action and click and take us up on this opportunity. So I addressed I have to think about it objection. One of the ways I'll also do this, because we're talking a lot about AI when I'm pitching right now, is I'll say, you might be thinking to yourself, I need to think about this. Well, 6 months are going to go by, and then you're going to look back on another big trend like AI and you missed it. Or you're going to look back like on another big trend like Bitcoin and you missed it. Or you're going to look back on another big trend like YouTube when it was big and you missed it, right? Or when it was first starting out, I should say, and you missed it. You don't want to be 6 months down the road thinking to yourself, man, I should have taken him up on that opportunity. I missed it again. So that's how I handle that. I have to think about an objection. Then I'll also go into money. And I'll tell a story about one of my customers who didn't think that he had the money. And in fact, I was sitting down with my customer, and I said, he stood up for one of my offers years ago. It was a $100,000 offer. And I said, you stood up. It seems like you want this opportunity. And I said, yeah. He said, yeah. I said, do you have the ability to pay? And he goes, well, I don't have the money. I said, so what inspired you to stand up? He's like, I just know I need to do this. I go, okay, so do you have any money in savings? No, I don't really have any money, a few $1,000s. Okay, do you have any money in investments? No, I haven't invested in anything. Do you have any credit cards? No, I don't believe in credit and my credit's not good. Do you have any money in retirement plans? No, I haven't saved for retirement. So anywhere under the sun, do you have any money? No. Is there any money under the sun, like an emergency fund or something that is there that you're not thinking of? Well, my mother left me an inheritance, and his mother happened to leave him $100,000 plus, right? Dollars. And so he's like, well, it's a rainy day fund. I'm like, well, it kind of sounds like it's rainy, right? And I said, what do you think we should do? And so he eventually invested in the program, and I helped take him where he was at $200,000 in revenue years ago to a $4 million business online. And he's a chiropractor. So many, many times when I tell that story, it handles the money consideration that people have, because when people are listening to an offer, they want to do it. But most people, they don't think they have the money, or they don't want to part with the money. But if they look into their universe and they look around at their assets or the money that they have or don't have, they tend to find something or think of something when I tell a story like that. And that pretty much handles the money consideration for most of the room. So I handle the money objection, right? And, then there's another objection that I do, or kind of another thing that I like to overcome, which is loss, right? There's a portion of the audience that it might be older, and they're going to look back, 20, 30 years from now and wish they had made a different choice in their life. And I kind of tell this story about my grandparents. It's this great story. That's a very personal story. I won't go into it now. And when I tell the story, people who are on track to not live an extraordinary life and see themselves 30, 40 years into the future looking back going, wow, I really didn't make the decisions to live an extraordinary life, they all of a sudden stand up. So most of my handling is when I'm pitching is handling the objections and then making many, many, many calls to action. I go on and on because I made many pitches from the stage. So I could go on and on about the different things that I do to pitch from the stage. But if you handle the three things that I have to think about it, the money objection, and then also the kind of loss, where people like loss sometimes gets people to stand up. Those three things always move the seminar room for me, okay? Then there's a final thing that I'll do is I'll tell a personal story at the end. That's kind of the loss story. So when you're making a pitch, one of the keys to a pitch is you don't want to go on and on and on in a pitch. Just giving information. You want to give information and tell a story. You want to give information and tell a story. And the reason why is when you're pitching people, and you're telling them about like, hey, here's what's my service is, or here's what my program is, people can take in very, very little data and recall it. And so when you make a pitch about your service, you give them a little bit of information and you tell them a story of somebody who succeeded with it, and then it becomes real to them. So a pitch should never be ba 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 ba. A pitch should be, hey, here's a story, or here's data, here's a story, here's data, here's a story. So those are my closing techniques there. Again, handle the objections at the end. Make sure you're telling stories frequently, and then give data, tell a story, give data, tell a story. And multiple calls to action means multiple. It could be 10, 11, 12, 13 calls to action. Whatever you need to do to move the room to get the result, that's what you do to close from the stage. All right. Hope this serves you. And I'll see you in one of the next videos. Stay well.